Exactly.
Hi everyone. Good evening. Thanks for coming. This is Mike Hollander. Mike will be our madrich, our guide on our trip. I know we have here with us tonight some who've already signed up for the trip and some who are considering signing up for the trip. And I'm expecting a few more people still. And I do want them to catch as much of this as possible because as I look around the room, some of the people that I'm expecting have not yet signed up for the trip, and we need them so that we can have the trip. So we will just take a moment as they come in. But why don't we just go around the room and introduce ourselves if we could? I'm not sure you all know each other. I think you do, but
I don't.
But Mike doesn't.
Definitely.
If you're already signed up for the trip, tell us that, and if you're considering it, maybe also share what is keeping you on the fence. And we'll start here.
I'm Selena Dunn. I've signed up for the trip. At least I hope I've signed up for it.
And also, if you've been to Israel, and if so, when were you last in Israel?
Yeah, I've been to Israel a number of times. My daughter used to live there. But it's probably been 7 years since I've been.
So I'm Tabakello. I signed up. I've never been to Israel, but I'm currently studying with Hebrew University to learn Hebrew so that I can at least understand for by the time I get there.
I'm Julia Husky. This will be my first time. I signed up, I'm not quite as keen as everybody, but I'm very much looking forward to it. I actually signed up 2 times before. It's just first time there wasn't enough numbers, and the second time there was more, and so but third time is a charm.
I'm actually Sweden. I've signed up for the trip and I've never been to Israel. I'm Kelly Reynolds. I am not signed up yet, but I'm like very close. I just wanted to get a little bit more information. I've never been to Israel, but always wanted to go, and it was me at some point, and this seems like a really great opportunity. So, my name's Amy, and I went to Israel once, less than a year ago, with these 2 wonderful gentlemen, and it was so great. Mike is an amazing tour guide. Rabbi Dan connected us with all the best speakers and programs and people, and it just felt like I can't imagine doing it any other way. So when I heard they were doing it again, I said, I'm there. So.
Well, I'm Jacqueline. My first time going to Israel.
Oh, and I signed up, yeah. Oh, and we signed up already, yeah.
My name's Wendy, and I signed up, and it will be my first time. I'm very excited.
Wow.
I'm Adam Frankel, and Amy signed me up, but I'm very much looking forward to this. I've never been to Israel, but I've lived vicariously through my daughter Claire, who's been a few times already, and also with Amy and Claire were there last year with you, Mike. They had such a great time, and I kept getting these texts. You should be here. You should be here.
No guilt.
I was like, of course, I know I've got work and whatever, but this will be a great opportunity. I'm really looking forward to spending some time on the beach in Tel Aviv.
In July, it's a good place to be.
I'm trying to think what day that will be in a very laid back itinerary, but
And it'll be before or after, or both.
We'll do a little.
Yeah. Thank you all. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. I've asked Mike to do a bit of an introduction to Israel, sort of since October 7th, and what is sort of the situation as it currently exists, and then to talk specifically about the itinerary and to answer any questions that you have about that. We did go in May, and this itinerary is built a little bit on what we did in May, but my goal here is for you to see Israel through the eyes and through the experiences of Israelis, and that is Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis, those that are religious and those that are not religious, those that support the government, those that don't support the government. Sometimes those can all be the same person, and for us to really have the opportunity to be in dialogue with them. I mean, Mike will tell us a lot when we're there, but the people and the places that we see will tell us so much more. And so there are some, as we get into the itinerary and we'll go through it, there are some sort of highlight moments where you'll go to an Israeli home for Shabbat dinner. 2 by 2 or 3 of you or whatever it is, will sit with Habib Rettigour and Yossi Klein Halevi and learn from them at different times. We'll have an opportunity when we're in Sderot to sit with teachers and families that live in that community and talk with them about what their experience has been like before October 7th, since October 7th, and how that community is changing so dramatically. But we'll get into the itinerary stuff later. We'll also get into details about security and safety and food and how the trip is structured in terms of when you come and when you go and all those things. But let's start, Mike, with you.
And how much time do I have?
It's about an hour and a half.
Okay, so I should be done by midnight.
And this is just a microphone to catch your questions. It's not
So it's always wonderful to be here because 2 reasons. I grew up in Vancouver, for those who don't know me. And what did I do here? I went to Talmud Torah, or as I call it, Talmud Torture. I was a graduate in the class of way back when. And I went to summer camp at Camp Miriam. I did everything at Camp Miriam, from being a camper to being the director for a few years. And I moved to Israel in 1988. So it's almost 40 years since I've been in Israel. And I married a woman from New York, 3 Israeli-born adult kids. I like to say that they are actually trilingual because they grew up in a house where we spoke English and, of course, Hebrew, living in the Jewish state. And they also spoke New York because my wife, Michelle, is from the Bronx. So it's unusual, some of the words that they choose to speak. And they're adult kids living, married, 2 grandkids now, one in Tel Aviv, a 2-year-old son, and a 6-month-old granddaughter up in the Galilee. And one of the things that I have learned in the past 2 years and 4 months is how to understand our society through a prism of a different generation. So, we made Aliyah when we were young in our 20s, and we got married and had kids, and to see how they're dealing with multiple stories at the same time. How do you live in a place where there's a constant security threat, or you might have to put on a uniform, as my youngest son did, for 315 days from October 7th in reserve duty, to getting on and studying and working and having fun and celebrating life, but also mourning loss. And I think that's one of the things that I'm always troubled by when I come here, and this is now, I think, my 5th trip to North America since the war began, is that not most of the people I speak to, but people wherever I speak always say to me, how do I deal with this friend and this colleague and this relative who, we can't even agree to have a conversation. I think part of the challenge is that you're living, and I in Israel, and both of us, maybe less in Canada, more in America, but definitely in America and Canada, people are living in a culture where the public space is becoming more and more binary. They're with us or against us. Remember George Bush? We all want to go back to George Bush. Isn't that kind of funny? But back then, and that's what's happening in Israel too, domestically, and you'll see a little bit about that. So I prepared a presentation that I presented at a number of communities and synagogues in Chicago in the past 2 weeks. I begin with an amazing picture my son-in-law took in the Machtesh Ramon. We're not quite going to get down there, but if you do want to go to the hottest place in Israel in July, just hypothetically, you should go there. And I put it up there because he went camping with his brother and friends, and he sent this picture in the family WhatsApp of this rainbow. And this was probably end of December, beginning of January. We still had 1 hostage buried. We got him back now on January 26th for Anvili. But the sense of how, young 30-something-year-olds can actually still appreciate the beauty that is Israel in spite of what we've been living through. And I call the presentations Looking Out and Looking In. First of all, we can breathe a lot better now. I don't know about you, Dan, and I don't know about you, Emmy, but I had on my wrist a yellow armband that I'd had since, I think, December, maybe January of 2023, 2024, and a little thing that I couldn't even take off if I wanted to, that was an armband that says, please don't remove until all the hostages are taken back. And then on January 26th, I was at the gym, saw the news, came home to my wife, Michelle. I said, come downstairs, bring the scissors so we can cut the yellow ribbons off of the side view mirrors of our car. And I cut that off for the first time. I hadn't worn anything that long in my life. And the truth is that we now are able to, we're now able to breathe a lot better, which is good. But the war is not officially over. So what I want to do, at least the first part, is kind of through the slides that I presented, give you a bit of an understanding of where we are in the Middle East, which hopefully will excite you about coming to Israel. And then the second part, I'm not going to show you the slides because I'm going to talk through the itinerary, but the challenges that we face internally within Israel. So there is the Middle East. You can see Israel. It's a little bit smaller. And if you've never flown to Israel, and that's most of you, I think, the funniest part about coming to Israel is, you watch if you can't sleep, on the plane, and then you get a little bit closer to Israel, and then as you get close, there's no way to put the ISRAEL. The 6 letters of Israel don't fit on the map on the screen on your airplane, which is actually kind of funny. But I've used 3 colors here, looking outwards. One is red, And these are the countries that we do not yet have relations with or peace with. And to try to understand where we are vis-a-vis these countries now, after October 7th. I should remind people, though, that Iran used to be a good friend of ours. And up until the late 1970s, there were multiple flights a week from Tel Aviv to Tehran. We used to get our oil that would come all around Saudi Arabia and get into the Gulf of Eilat. But Iran, for many, many years, has tried to export their fundamentalist Shia Islamic revolution abroad through something called the IRGC. You've heard of the IRGC? Anybody know what it stands for? Very good. Last time I asked this question at Shabbat in a conservative synagogue in Chicago, not naming any names, they're like the Iranian. I'm like, no, it's the Islamic, which is important because Iran is a country and an ancient empire, the Persian, the Sassanid Empire, but they see themselves more through the prism, or at least the leadership does, of faith. And when I look outwards in the neighborhood, and we'll look afterwards at Israel, one of the reasons that we've got so many internal challenges is that there are multiple ways that we look at ourselves. And just like in Iran, there's the mullahs who see themselves through the prism of Shia fundamentalism, and then there's some people who see themselves as Persians, for example. But you've also got a significant number of people who aren't even Iranian. There are Azeris or there are Kurds, for example, right, and other peoples inside of Iran. So Iran is a country that exported its revolution to the IRGC, and they wanted to create the so-called Ring of Fire, which funded proxy agents militarily, financially, all around us in Gaza, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria. What am I missing over there? What did I miss? In Lebanon, of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the idea was that they wouldn't have to wage war with us, but together they would put enough pressure on us, and if need be militarily as well, at the exact same time. And that would ultimately, push the Zionist entity in the sea, and they would conquer the third holiest site in Islam and win lots of what they call in the Middle East brownie points, literally amongst all of the Muslims in the world, because they got back the place that has been under the Zionist cancerous hands for over 100 years now. So that's part of their idea. How we are vis-a-vis Iran today is totally different than we were. Think about it, a year ago. You guys were there in May. And shortly after you left, literally, there was this 12-day war. We'd never had anything like it, where the Israeli Air Force went, look at the distance. 1,500 kilometers to here, but they also went as far as places like Mashhad, up over there on the border with Afghanistan. Hours and hours and hours of flying, hundreds and hundreds of sorties of airplanes and unmanned drones, and not a single airplane was hit. A couple drones were hit, but not a single airplane was hit. We had total air supremacy over Iran, a country of 90 million people. That's 9 times our population, a lot larger than 9 times our size, and they weren't able to really do anything against us. It's pretty incredible, on the one hand. On the other hand, they shot 500 missiles at us. We had an 86% interception rate, but that means we missed 14%, and there was significant damage and loss of life. Not as much. Any loss of life is significant, don't get me wrong, but 30 people killed when 500 ballistic missiles are shot at you is pretty remarkable, to say the least. But we're in a very different situation vis-a-vis Iran. You all know that the Iranian nuclear program was totally obliterated in June, right?
Yeah, right. Really.
So wait a minute, if it was totally obliterated, then why is
Why
there
are
a
they
good...
having the argument?
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
discussion friendly. But the good news is,
Argument.
and Rabbi Dan and I were just talking about this. I'm supposed to fly back on Sunday home via Toronto, and I literally on the way here in the Uber, I'm looking and it says, everything ready in the Persian Gulf. Anyway, but I digress. We're in a fundamentally different position vis-a-vis Iran today, and that's something that's very, very important to understand. And I think the reason that whether it happened or not, the almost total obliteration of the Iranian nuclear program by the Americans was done because Israel did what it did in the 12 days of the war. So what is the big difference between where Israel is today and the American administration is today vis-a-vis Iran? America is talking mostly, almost exclusively about what? They want the nuclear program to end. Well, at least the non-civilian nuclear program to end, right? So does that mean that they're going to allow to have enriched uranium enriched somewhere else and then used for because you might not realize this, but Iran is the world's second largest oil deposit and third largest natural gas deposit, so they need alternate energy sources, and they're environmentally conscious. Sorry, let me take the tongue out of my cheek. But the point is that America wants a deal, or the president wants a deal, and the deal will be to stop them from achieving nuclear weapons. But Israel says, wait a minute, that's part of the deal, but the deal also has to be to make sure that not just no nuclear weapons, but they stop their ballistic missiles. That is a massive threat. I mean, the fact that 40-foot-long rockets can go 100 kilometers, out of the Earth's atmosphere and very accurately target places that they aim for in the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv and the Soroka Hospital and the Weizmann Institute and other is pretty crazy. So from Israel's point of view, yes, nuclear program, yes, ballistic program. And third, what's the third aim that Israel wants? To make sure that the Iranians aren't going to fund their proxies as they continue to do. So far, so clear vis-a-vis Iran, right? Now, who's the friends of Iran in this part of the world? Russia, I remind you, is just up here. And what's that little country over there? China, exactly. It's made in China. Everything's made in China. But anyway, yeah, China. Very important. Why? Think about it. What other country has had this unprecedented number of drones and missiles shot at it in the past few years?
Yeah, okay.
Ukraine. And where are those drones coming from?
China and Iran.
Mostly from Iran. But yes, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
well, China's giving people who you want.
Giving what?
People.
Yeah, they got a lot of people they can spare. Anyway, but Yemen. Now, who knows? But you might not realize this, but there was a civil war in Yemen.
Yep.
Any idea, guesstimate of how many people were killed in that civil war?
Huge number of millions.
According to the UN, like 377,000 people. But I don't remember any SFU or UBC march condemning any of that's happening because, why not? Because this is a complicated neighborhood. But if you look at every country here, except one, that's Israel, what is common to all these countries? The conflicts that they have are internal conflicts between their own peoples, or brown peoples versus white people versus brown, right? Indigenous people versus indigenous people versus colonizers, oppressed versus oppressors. So there are oppressed and oppressors in each of these countries, but the West doesn't look at them deep enough because that's their issue and that's their own issue. Guys, they want to kill each other, that's their own problem. But who knew? But the Yemenites are allies with the Iranians, and they shot hundreds of missiles toward Israel too.
Well, they also blocked the transfer between the Red Sea, and that was a major thing because now you're stopping trade.
Remind me of your name?
Tabitha.
Tabitha. But trade to where, Tabitha?
Through the Mediterranean to
Europe.
Europe.
Fantastic. So Israel has a port in Eilat. It's a nice little port. My son was just there in a sports competition 2 weeks ago, and the port has been closed. Nobody even hears about this for 2 years and 4 months. There's no marine traffic because any boat that has to get in there has to come through here. Mm-hmm. And Egypt, there's something called the Suez Canal, and the Suez Canal has been limited by what boats can come through there because the Yemenites control this little strait over there. And that's where the Russians and the Iranians are shorting. What's that?
So it also helps when the Somalians are boarding anything and everything they can get.
But don't forget, Tabitha, there's a new little country here called Somaliland that most of us have never visited, let alone heard of. And Somaliland is a Muslim country, about 4 or 5 million people. And the one country that recognized them is us. Now, why? Because if we can maybe have an alliance, and it's a complicated neighborhood. So Yemenites, what interest do they have with us? Nothing. There's no border except the fact that it's supported in this crazy ideology of Shia Islam that is from Iran. What about Syria? If I would have stood here in November 1st of 2024, and I would say that the 53-year ruthless regime in Syria, which is responsible for how many deaths in their civil war, approximately, throw out a number, 600,000. You're doing the math, that's 600,000 in Syria and 377,000 in Yemen. That's 1 million, just to put it in context. But we don't hear about that much. If I would have told you that in 11 days, the 53-year-old regime of the Assad family would fall, you would say, impossible. They've withstood so much. Right? Now, why am I sharing that with you? Because today, Israel actually has soldiers inside of Syria, as we have soldiers inside of Lebanon. They've been there for over a year now. And their job is to make sure that the Syrian forces, government rebels, whoever, and Lebanese Hezbollah don't get close to our border and threaten us. And Syria went through this crazy civil war. They had this coup. And Israel, before the guy could actually fully install himself in power, destroyed most of the Syrian Air Force, Navy, and Army. So they're there. There's a threat to us, of course, but supported for many, many years by the Iranians. It's a totally different threat we have today. Wrong way. What about Lebanon? Lebanon, as you know, is a Western democracy. So it's not Western, but it's a democracy. But it's a totally dysfunctional democracy that has had multiple civil wars. And there is one group in Lebanon named Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran. Hezbollah is a Shia organization. They're Shiites and they're Sunnis in Islam. And they are the largest group, maybe 35% of the population in Lebanon. And they vote and they sit in the parliament and they have ministries and they have a lot of power. And they were, up until October 7th, perceived as our greatest threat because they had 150,000 rockets and missiles that were launched headed toward Israel. But the good news is they don't have them anymore. They have some, but they don't have nearly as many. And so they're less of a threat than we are today. Now, I know some of you who've never been to Israel are saying, Rabbi, are you serious? I should go to this neighborhood? You should, because you'll see why in just a minute. What about Qatar? Qatar, as you might know, if you're fans of European football, sponsor most of the European, many of the European professional soccer teams, and significantly fund a lot of institutions of higher education in America. Qatar is good for us or bad for us? The color is red. It should be a clue. So the problem with Qatar is that they harbor and they host the leadership of Hamas. And Qatar, on the one hand, wants to, be a good friend with America. In fact, the United States has its biggest military presence in the little country of Qatar. But Qatar is kind of playing a dual game of, on the one hand, supporting these radical ideas of Islamic fundamentalism through the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and Hamas. And it's very, very complicated. But I remind you, in the 1990s, the first Israeli envoy anywhere in the Middle East was in Qatar. We never fully signed peace with them, but they were in Qatar. So it's complicated. What about Saudi Arabia? We don't have peace with them. We have a lot of relations with them, but most people don't talk about them. There was just a Israel Economic Forum hosted, I met a guy in Chicago who was there in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia wants to normalize with Israel, but in return for getting better protection from America, which is complicated because they need to sign, the Senate, not the House, has to sign a 2/3 majority treaty to ratify that. And the quid pro quo, Saudi Arabia would normalize with Israel if Israel would move toward a two-state solution vis-a-vis the Palestinians. And that process was moving forward in the summer and the fall of 2023, and that was one of the reasons behind why Hamas decided when they decided to launch their attack. So, will we have peace with Saudi Arabia, as they say in the Middle East, inshallah, God willing, but not in the short term, hopefully in the long term. And when that happens, what will happen, a lot of other Arab countries, Muslim countries, will come and get warmer relations with us. So far, so good. You really understand the Middle East. You've all got credit for undergraduate course. What about Turkey? Now, wait a minute. It's complicated. Turkey, it's great restaurants. And so Turkey, like Iran, in the early decades of Israel, was a good friend of Israel. In fact, the first generation of leaders, our first Prime Minister, Ben Gurion, fostered relationships with non-Arab Muslim countries. Right? Turkey they're Turks. Iran, they're Persians. They're ethnically not Arabs. Arabs come from the Arabian Peninsula, but they're Muslims. And we had good relations with Turkey until not that long ago. We have peace with them. We have diplomatic relations. The ambassadors have been recalled. The Turkish airline flights that used to fly from Vancouver directly to Istanbul and continue to Tel Aviv don't fly to Tel Aviv anymore. I think they still go to Istanbul a few times a week in case you want to get there, but you have to swim from Istanbul to get to Tel Aviv. So don't use that as an option. But Turkey is a huge country, and Turkey wants to make Turkey great again, literally. And so they're inspired by a guy south of the 49th border who wants to make his country great again. And they're trying to invest and support all sorts of other peoples in the Middle East, right? Complicated neighborhood. We have interest with them. And in the peace plan that the American president had put forward in the fall of 2025, called for Turkey and Qatar, who are not on good terms with us, to be part of the peace, the Board of Peace, which I think tomorrow, right? Thursday is supposed to be meeting Washington. Now here's the good news. You ready for the good news, ladies? I see those two faces in the back. You ready for the good news? Good. The good news is blue. Somaliland, right? This little piece over there, this new independent country, and we have relations with them. Why is that good news? I mean, it's one of the poorest places in the world. They're all, Somalis love, unfortunately, but they've been killing each other for decades, and nobody knows who's right and who's wrong. But the bottom line is there's an independent country who can reach out to Israel, which tells us that not all Muslims hate all Jews, and even if they don't love us, they're willing to live in peace with us. Obviously, they hope to benefit from a relationship with us, but they're not the first, because we have the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, two countries that, although small, are quite important, and definitely financially, the Emirates even more so than Qatar, than Bahrain, are countries that the greatest diplomatic achievement of the previous Trump administration was the Abraham Accords, where they normalized with us. I said that when the war began, in the fall of 2023, Turkish Airlines stopped flying into Tel Aviv. They had been the second largest airline flying into Tel Aviv after El Al, and the second airline in the world. Not a single Turkish airline flight has been there since, in 2 years, 4 months. But Etihad and Etihad and Emirates Air fly directly multiple times a day to and from Tel Aviv and to the Gulf countries, and they have not blinked. They fly as often as El Al flies. In other words, you can fly, they're going to fly. In fact, you came back, I think, with them in April of 2024 because that was the only way to. It's crazy. So what do they know? What do they know in the Middle East? And what does Morocco, who also signed diplomatic relations with Israel in the Abraham Accords? And what does Egypt in the late 1970s? And what does Jordan in 1994 signing peace with Israel? What do they all know? They all know that we're not going anywhere. And they all know that they can benefit a lot better instead of being in conflict with us, being in cooperation with us. And they can benefit a lot from whatever it is, whether it's vaccines during COVID, whether it's desalination plants, whether it's sewage treatment, whether it's cyber technology, whether it is military technology that protects them from whom? From the Iranian Persians over there who want to dominate the Middle East. So far, hopefully you understood that this neighborhood is one of the craziest places in the world to try to understand. And as I said at the beginning, the tragedy is that we're today, I think, in North America, in a place where people see things in a very binary reality. You can't say good guys, bad guys, because there are good elements and there are bad elements about many of the neighbors. But the fact is that today Israelis sleep a lot better than they did any time in recent decades. Why? Because all of those countries around Israel, whether it's in Syria, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Iranians, the Saudis, not the Saudis, but the Yemenites, Qataris, they all pose threats to us, but a lot less than they did beforehand. And we are in a much better position to protect ourselves, number one. And number two, the countries who have normalized with us see the value of normalizing with us. And the bizarre thing is, you would think that the Emirates and the Bahrainis and the monarchy in Jordan and the government in Egypt would all boycott Israel, like students at Columbia and UBC and wherever else want to. But they don't, because they understand you live in a complicated neighborhood and it's possible to live multiple stories at the exact same time. So lesson one is it's a brand new neighborhood. And the good news is that there's our little Somaliland over there, small little country of 4 million people. But the good news is Muslim and Arab countries can do business with Israel, and it's in their interest. What does this new Middle East look like? Here again are the proxies I said earlier that Iran sent out. We don't know. We do not know what the new Middle East is going to look like. But we do know that a major watershed event in our lifetime, like for some of us the Six-Day War in 1967 was this crazy 12-day war where rockets, hundreds of rockets and drones were sent from Iran and from Yemen into Israel. And as I said, Israel achieved total air supremacy over Iran. But you can see that's where my kids live, actually, and that my son and daughter-in-law and grandson over in that building over there. In fact, in June, you can see it's dark because nobody had moved in yet. They just moved in October, I think. They just finished the building, but they were in that building and then they moved over to that building. We can see the Iron Dome interceptors. It's crazy to think about that Israel is the most, I think, innovative country in the world with 10 million people. And one of the innovations is this military technology that has saved not just countless Israeli lives, but countless Palestinian lives, right? And countless lives in other countries, particularly the United States. And the tragedy, of course, is that the technology that Israel has, a lot of the Arab countries want as well, those who we do business with, and we can't quite give it to them, obviously. But the tragedy is that the resources that we spend in developing this is at the expense of developing other things. But there's still a lot that Israel is developing. So what are the questions after particularly June of last year of what the future is going to look like in the Middle East? Have we actually emerged victorious vis-a-vis Hamas or vis-a-vis Hezbollah? Has the Ring of Fire been destroyed? Damaged, but not fully destroyed. Have we deterred, or can we even deter these countries, right, or these organizations? Israelis will tell you today they feel safer than they did October 7th, definitely, and October 6th. Does it mean that we don't know that there could be a threat at any moment in time? Absolutely, and we have to prepare for that. Is it even possible to deter these fundamentalist organizations in the neighborhood? Big question. Don't know. Don't know if you can ever get rid of them all, but all we can try to do is, make the glass more half full than half empty and try to win friends as we have successfully. It's getting harder, though, because of the internal issues, which I'll talk about in just a minute. What's the future of Iran? Who knows? I mean, I no idea. Dan will correct me on this, but when the Second Temple was destroyed, prophecy was given over to fools and, was it? It was to fools and, definitely not me, fools and whatever, but let's leave it, fools and children, I think. But nobody knows what's going to happen in Iran. Just as I said earlier, if somebody would have told you November 1st, 2024 was going to happen to Syria, you wouldn't have believed it. And keep in mind, the Americans and the Israelis and the Russians and the Iranians, all of whom, the latter two, were entrenched deeply in Syria, had no idea what was coming down the pipe. And so we have no idea what is going to happen. Are they going to collapse? Is the revolution going to succeed? Just last week, were there protests in Vancouver?
Yes.
There were massive protests of millions of people, all hundreds of thousands of people in different places in North America. It was unbelievable. But is that going to help? Who knows? And finally, which I think is one of the key questions, which I'll talk about in the second part of our future, and that is that should Israel continue to be dependent on the American president or on America? So on the one hand, from a protection point of view, why do Israelis sleep better now? Not just that we've got 5 levels of aerial defense now, but because we've got half of the American military, whatever the number is, in that area. And a lot of what they have are airplanes that are able to shoot down drones and missiles that are shot toward us. And so we're very grateful for that on the one hand. On the other hand, our prime minister wants to achieve autonomy and cut the umbilical cord and stop this $3.8 billion funding of American military, which might happen, might not happen. So big questions on that front as well. What's happening here?
It's not like Canada didn't learn, don't trust.
What's that?
We have. We've learned not to trust
To trust who?
the U.S.
Yeah, although Israel's in a different situation because you guys are protected, right? I mean, the only reason that they don't use Canada is, did I say Greenland? Anyway, but no, we live in a neighborhood where there is a need for a superpower protection. But think of the nature of that relationship. As I said, the Americans didn't launch their attack on those 3 nuclear sites until Israel pretty much made Iranian airspace clear. So America understands that of all its allies that it has, there's only one ally that A, gives it incredible technology that it shares with America, and B, is able to stand up on its own 2 feet as well, and is an ally, but isn't just, a blood, what's the word I'm thinking of, isn't just leeching up the support. Anyway, this is an amazing article from November, December 2025 from an Iranian American, actually, raised in America, but he talks about how the war, the 12-day war, laid bare the fragility of the Iranian system, exposing the enormous gulf between their ideological bluster and the limited capabilities of the regime. And who would have thought this massive revolution would start? Where is it gone? We don't know. How many tens of thousands of people are killed? We don't know. But just to remind you, revolution back in the late 1970s, I already mentioned over 90 million Iranians. Not everybody is Persian. Some view themselves through the Persian of Islam. Some view themselves through the Persian of their ethnic Persian, Azeri, or Kurdish background. Massive country, as I mentioned before. 3rd largest oil, 2nd largest gas deposits in the world. But here is the kicker. You would think with all that natural resources, it would be a wealthy country, correct? Their GDP is about 1/10 of that per capita of Israel. $5,800 a year. The Israeli economy is larger than that. In other words, Israeli GDP is 500. That's how much is produced in Israel every year. Gross domestic product, $550 billion. In Israel, Iran is less than that, and they have 9 times their population. Just to put it in context, it's crazy. Why are they revolting? Not because of Islam, but more because of the high cost of living inside of Iran. So before I turn it over to inside Israel, is the war over? Well, our prime minister in the summer, just after you guys were there, said, here are the 5 aims. Any of these aims been achieved by Israel yet? Number 2, hostages freed. Now, the last one wasn't freed. He was uncovered, unfortunately, exhumed from a cemetery. So the war isn't officially over, but we tried to target Hamas back in September, you might remember. We failed. We missed. Prime Minister goes to Washington. I don't know if you recognize the gentleman on the right-hand side over there, but he insisted that the Prime Minister make a phone call to the Prime Minister of Qatar to apologize. And you see on his face. And later that day, he announced his 20-point plan to end the conflict. And forget the text, but look at the world's headlines, the leader of the free world. If you ask Israelis today, by the way, as you see the decimation of Gaza and the AI-generated image of Trump's vision of the future of Gaza, it's important to realize that 73% of Israelis in a poll last week support the policies of President Trump in the Middle East. 73%. You're not going to get that in America, let alone Canada, maybe in Greenland. No, I'm kidding, but it's the other way around. It's 105% of the Icemen in Greenland opposed. But Israelis like what he's done, because think about it. Whether we like him or not, and my guess is if we took a straw poll in this room, we'd dislike him more than like him. Doesn't matter. But he got the hostages back, and he ended the war, or end the war in whatever way, shape, or form. So the 3 parts of ending the war. Part 1 was return of all the hostages. Done. Part 2 is supposed to be, and we're supposed to be in it right now, and that's why this Board of Peace is meeting in Washington tomorrow, is to ensure that Hamas disarms and we begin to transition from the unbelievable, horrible, I say, destruction in Gaza to what the future might look like in Gaza. The president comes to Israel. He speaks to Knesset, causes a lot of internal issues, but he's supported by the left and right, unusual inside of our parliament. And that night he's in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh, and he says, all the countries that have fought for so long will now work together to complete the mission. Gaza is only part of it. The largest part of it is peace in the Middle East. And Israelis, that message resonates very deeply with Israelis. Whether you think he's doing it for his own personal interests, many of us do believe that, but still, the guy doesn't like war. And the guy is able, because of the relationships that America has with other countries in the Middle East, to press Qatar and to press Turkey, who aren't friendly to us on the one hand, but they're friendly to America. So this is part of the dilemma that we live in. It's very, 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 very complicated part of the world. Anyway, forget all these other pictures. Thankfully, we have all the hostages home. The living hostages came home in October. The last of the dead hostages came home. And if we look at Gaza today, the map on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's this yellow line, which we hear a lot in the news. The IDF withdrew. Now we're on the eastern side over here of that line. Gaza is very small. It's crazy. It's 40 kilometers top to bottom. My son's a crazy athlete, and he runs. He just did the triathlon, the Ironman in Eilat. But the fastest person in the world, the fastest marathon of those Kenyans and those Ethiopians run a marathon in 2 hours. They can go from the top of Gaza to the south in less than 2 hours. It's crazy. From the time you left your house till you're going to get home, unless I go until midnight, which I promise I won't, that is how small Gaza actually is. And so Israel controls 53% of it today. And part of the idea of the second part of the plan is eventually Israel will draw to the red line and then just this little area so that Israel will maintain a presence within Gaza to ensure the protection of the communities along Gaza. We were in Kfar Aza, where Amy, was that where the kibbutz went to? Do you remember? So we were in kibbutz Kfar Aza, just opposite Gaza City. So there are Israelis who are living just outside the Gaza Strip, and we might not be implementing the second phase. It's very straightforward in this flowchart that Jared Kushner presented last month. But the Board of Peace, the chairman of the Board of Peace is President Trump. There's an executive board. There's a senior advisors. This is important, but these are the two most important components. One is this NCAG, which you hear a lot of in the news, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. There are 15 members of it. They're Palestinians, mostly from the West Bank, some from Gaza. They're in Egypt. They're not ready to go into Gaza yet because they're not officially launching. Maybe after the Board of Peace is announced and all the financial pledges and the UA pledge cards are signed tomorrow in Washington, they can start to begin to rebuild, and maybe they'll come into Gaza. The other issue is this ISF. You've heard of this acronym, the International Stabilization Force. And it's supposed to be a military force that's going to ensure stability and peace in Gaza. But guess how many soldiers are part of this? 0. Maybe 8,000 Indonesians might join at some point in the future. But it's a challenge to get to this crazy idea of how to get to this. Now, as crazy as this seems, and I'm sure many of you have heard a number of the same podcasts that me and Rabbi Dan have listened to, that this could be, and you think 30 years ago, and this is what one of the reasons why I still live in Israel. 30 years ago, Shimon Peres, one of the architects of the Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinians, tried to raise money. Most of it today sits in the bank account of his ex-wife Sua Arafat in Paris, billions of dollars to improve the economic standard of living in Gaza and the West Bank, out of the hope that if they can elevate their material quality of life, they'll live in peace with us a little bit better. And the tragedy is that off of Gaza, like off of Israel, they're gas deposits. And they could, and there are a lot of countries in the Middle East who have a lot of money and who have experience in this field, literally gas field, they could help the Palestinians what's the word? Extract, that's the word. Extract, did I say frack? Extract that gas and use it to make Gaza an unbelievable place. So and as I said, why do I still live in Israel? And for those who haven't been there, this is the key. And that is that we live in a place that continues to be defined, as our people have defined, by one of the core parts of our DNA is the sense of hope. That we actually can, most of us, not all of us, because there's a small group of Israelis who say, no, get rid of all the Gazans, level Gaza, make Gaza Jewish again and put Jewish settlements in there. But it's a small group, even if they are in our government and even if they are senior ministers. But the majority of Israelis say, listen, if they can live as comfortably as the Bahrainis and the Omanis and the Emiratis and the Israelis can live in Tel Aviv 20 miles away, then we too can make things work a little bit better for them, and hopefully they'll hate us a little bit less. With this, I'm going to turn over to the itinerary, and I highlighted 5 major issues that concern Israelis I'm not going to go on this now, but security. 2, the question of service of IDF for everybody. You know, there's an exemption that is, I don't want to say legally, but is in conflict as we speak and in discussion over 80,000 young men who, between the age of 18 to 26, who should but aren't serving in the military. The question of the fragility of Israeli democracy, the economics of all of this stuff, and of course, how do we rebuild Israeli society and communities? But instead of showing slides, I want to walk a little bit through the itinerary. So take one and pass them around. And the itinerary has been constructed by my friends and colleagues, that is Rabbi Dan and my colleagues at J Squared, to try to go as deep as we possibly can to understand what some of these challenges are in Israeli society. I got last one. So how do you do all of this in, what is it, 7 days on the ground, Don? 8 days on the ground?
9 days.
But 7 on the ground.
On the ground, full days where, there are 36 hours of activity inside of a day. And this is one of the first itineraries that I have seen. I didn't tell you this time, but one of the first itineraries that I have seen that actually doesn't just see Israel through the prism of the war. Because Israel is still there, and the economy has grown, which is nuts. And we've buried a lot of soldiers, a lot of people who were killed on October 7th. But what makes Israel such an amazing place is, A, it's home for us, obviously, but B, is it's a place that, if you look at that entire neighborhood, we have lived almost 80 years under that constant threat, and we've still managed not only to survive, but to thrive. And I think that in a small little place of 10 million people is probably one of the most creative and not just vivacious, but creative and vibrant places on the planet, in spite of the prism of fighting the longest war we've ever possibly thought. So the idea of the itinerary is to both grapple with the challenges that we face post-October 7th and understand some of the foundations. So for example, when we land, we're literally going to begin by driving up north to what I call one of the first startup endeavors in Israel, a Jewish community that was built in 1880 by immigrants who came there rather than to North America, when the majority of immigrants did. And of course, have an opportunity to drink a little bit of wine, and then continue all the way up to the Upper Galilee, where you guys, right? You guys, is it Metula down, or is it all of the Upper Kiryat? What's the upper? So you guys, you might not know this through your Jewish community in Vancouver, have a relationship with a community in Israel, Kiryat Shmona, which is close to my heart because that's where my daughter and son-in-law met at the Tel Chai College, actually up there, and we're going to be spending a couple nights up in the Galilee. We're going to be going up to the border, and we're going to be going deep with people from an organization called the Alma. And take these home, by the way, and look up some of these places, because we won't do any background reading. Alma is this independent think tank made up of ex-intelligence officers, including a Sarit who founded it, and they do a lot of analytics to understand what's happening on the northern front, particularly vis-a-vis Lebanon and Syria. And if you notice how the itinerary is constructed, to look into the challenges and hopes. And that's always there in everything that we do. There's lots of challenges, but there's lots of hope involved. And of course, grappling with one of the, I think, more divisive internal issues, and that is the tension in Israeli society. Actually, I have a slide on this. The tension in Israeli society between, where are we? Between the Jewish and democratic nature of Israeli society. So we define ourselves as a Jewish democratic state. For some of us, you can't really distinguish between those two core values. But for others, the democratic character of Israel is more important. And for others, the Jewish character of Israel is more important. I like to say that each of us in our own lives have multiple components of who we are. And sometimes, let's say, if I'm Israel, I feel more Jewish, and sometimes I feel more democratic. I always say, I did a session here, I think right here, a year or two ago, called Is Liberal Zionism an Oxymoron? And I begin by saying that I'm a liberal Zionist. And sometimes, when my country is being attacked, my Zionism is more prevalent in who I am. And sometimes when my government is trying to destroy the independence of the Supreme Court, my liberal identity is a little bit more present. So I'm kind of in both places at the same time. So look at this crazy graph this is from the Israel Democracy Institute. Look on the right-hand side, secular Israelis, people who define themselves as having nothing to do with organized religion. 7 out of 10 Israelis think that the Jewish component of Israel and public space is too dominant. It's not fair. I live in Tel Aviv. I don't have enough money to have a car. I want to go to the beach. I live 3 miles from the beach. It's hot in July. I want to get to the beach. I can't afford a taxi. Why can't I have a public bus? I pay taxes. I should be served by my Jewish democratic country. Right? But look at the other side, wrong way. 73% of ultra-Orthodox Haredim, who are about 14% of Israeli society, say that the democratic component of Israel is too dominant. That's Israel for you. That there are these unbelievably passionate subgroups, call them tribes if you will, within Israeli society who are vying for control, as it were, greater control or influence in the public sphere. And one of our biggest challenges is, on this day, Tuesday, how do you deal with those minorities, the 21% of Israelis who are not Jewish, the Druze, the Christians, and the Muslim Arabs. So we're going to be spending time up in Akko, which is a mixed Jewish city, and then we're going to be going and meeting people involved in Kiryat Shmona and having I didn't even know there's a community up there, Dan, a small Reformed community in the upper part of the Upper Galilee. So different parts of Israel, different peoples, and different voices. We're then going to make our way down toward Jerusalem. And as I said, I can't tell you how many groups I've guided since the war where they go to Jerusalem, they kiss the stones of the Western Wall, and then they move on. Because they say, how do I come to Israel and not go to Jerusalem and the Kotel, the Western Wall? But on the other hand, we're going to have a whole day. We're going to be looking at what makes Jerusalem important to Jews, what makes Jerusalem important to Christians, and what makes Jerusalem important to Muslims. Like, why do 4 billion people figure out how they're going to behave in the world every day based on the core stories that took place in and around the old city, which is, of course, still there and is still exciting and vibrant. And then we're going to make our way down one day, down to the south. This is day 5. We're going to meet, hopefully Chaviv will be in the country. He seems to be a lot out of the country more than he's in the country these days. But we're going to go to the area of the Western Negev that was the most hardly hit on October 7th. And by this point, and I was there 2.5 weeks ago now at one of the kibbutzim, most of the kibbutzim are rebuilding, and not everybody wants to go back to live on the border so close to Gaza, but many of them are they're rebuilding. And the question, of course, will be what the new communities are going to look like, and how do you tell the story of what happened. I'm going to get to a slide. I can go, this is probably better. How do you tell the story of what happened, but also live in the present? And I will show you one image to give you a sense of that. If I can find it. Yeah, this is Kibbutz Nir Oz. And on Kibbutz Nir Oz, on the one hand, this is the kibbutz that had 100 of the 400 residents were either killed or taken hostage on October 7th. The bulldozers are destroying all of the houses. And as you walk around the kibbutz there, you see this new memorial route. And it says, every house has a story. And just to put it in context, the light green are houses that were not attacked, but all the other houses, someone who was killed was taken hostage. Crazy. So there are going to be people living there. There are people living there now. Some of the residents have come back. Some young people are in there in a leadership program. But our challenge will be to grapple with that dilemma of how do we go back to living where people lived for 80 years almost, and how do we rebuild the society with the scars that we have, but looking forward, looking to the future. We're then going to make our way toward Tel Aviv. One of the most exciting things, I think, in the itinerary is visiting project. Were we there together? 24? We were there together, right? This incredible endeavor that is trying to connect Israelis with North American Jewish communities. We are a people endowed with this incredible storytelling gene. And it was Elie Wiesel who said that when the Hasidic rabbis asked, why did God create man or human people, we would say today? And he said, because God loves stories. And I think one of our challenges as we move forward and rebuild, and I say not just rebuild Israel, but I think we rebuild Jewish identity outside of Israel, is what is the story we're going to tell? Is it the story of the bad that happened to us, the persecution, the crimes of October 7th, or is it the good? And so when you have an opportunity, as Dan already said, as we will on Friday night, to go to a community where my friend Lana was actually just with them in Calabasas for 2 years, with Kipnis, Paul Kipnis. So she's a Russian-born, Israeli-ordained rabbi, and we're going to have an unbelievable Kabbalat Shabbat, and then go into people's homes and meet them and talk with them and maybe meet their kids. How was life in Israel? How was life in Israel? Crazy opportunity. Shabbat, we're going to go down to the Dead Sea in Masada. Again, classic first-time visit experience in Israel. And I will say I've been to Masada now, I think, 3 times since the war. And how Mike tells the story of Masada after 30 plus years of telling the story of Masada is different today because of what happened on October 7th. And so even if Dan and I would have done this itinerary 3 years ago, it would all look very, very differently. And I think one of the reasons to come to Israel is to understand here, when you come back to Israel, what is the story we want to tell? And what is the community that we want to build, given the trauma that we've all experienced? Our second to last day, if I'm remembering, is our last day actually, is doing three main things. Visiting Magen David Adom, one of the more incredible organizations in Israel that has Jews and Arab Christians and Arab Muslims and Druze working together to save lives. They have a ability to get to someone within 3 minutes. Just think if you called 911, how long, heaven forbid, it would take, well, we're close to a hospital here maybe, but crazy, 3 minutes to get there, and for all sorts of reasons. So we'll hear about that and the responsibility that they have because of what happened on October 7th in Israeli society. And then we're going to do some opportunity to rebuild on two levels. One, physically, literally to build some furniture at this, somebody in this room apparently loves woodworking, I don't know who, but build furniture. I did that once with a group already. It was amazing. You literally go and you build furniture that is used for people whose homes were destroyed, but also to meet a very important group called Brothers for Life, which is a not-for-profit that is, actually I think they're going to change their name because now it's Brothers and Sisters for Life, and they take any soldier, physically or emotionally wounded, and they provide a warm home and a safe haven and a place where they can get all sorts of physical and emotional therapy. And of course, the numbers of how many people need this is through the roof because of that. And I will end with this before I turn over to questions about specifically about the itinerary or in general, and that is that you all know, and you've all heard this a lot, that we as a people, Israel is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. You all know. Any mental health professionals in the world here, social workers in the room, psychologists, rabbis. See if he's listening. That's always a test. He's not listening. Anyway, but we have PTSD. I say we, I don't mean Israel, I mean the Jewish people. And I don't mean post-October 7th, I mean that's who we are. We've been through 4,000 years of traumas and rebuilding post-traumas. Whether it was, the Exodus, or that's the destruction of the temple, we rebuild and we recreate. And so we are now at the moment where we're beginning to write that next chapter after. We haven't fully achieved closure yet, because we still live under, we're still potentially we're definitely in the Middle Eastern war zone. But what we see a lot of in Israeli society is both grappling with PTSD and dealing with something else called post-traumatic growth. If you haven't heard about it, Google it. It's an unbelievable field that's relatively new in the world of mental health, only 30 years old, that some two psychologists coined this phrase. And they essentially say that it's possible that people who've experienced trauma can emerge stronger after that trauma. Not easy, but it's possible. And I think that coming to Israel now, or next summer, or this summer, is an opportunity to understand A, what happened, and B, understand how we can not only repair the wounds, but build back, as a lot of the people who've come back to kibbutz, Nir Oz and other kibbutzim in the area, not just build back, but build back stronger than we were beforehand, both physically and, as I said, and spiritually / emotionally. So a little bit of understanding of where we are externally, internally, lots of issues, and as I said, welcome to Israel. And I'll end, of course, with I got to end with two good notes, right there. This is my son. I'm a proud father. He finished the Ironman, crazy, but I asked him, because he did 315 days of reserve duty, and he was training a lot for 9 months to do this. I said, "Are you doing this instead of therapy?" And he said, "Nope, I'm doing it because I want to do it." And he said, "But maybe, I don't know." And I spoke to him today. He signed up for a half Ironman in the Sea of Galilee in a few months. But why am I sharing a picture of him? As I said, I fell because he's my son. But at the event, they shared two stories of two people who were Ironman athletes in the past. One guy who won his age category in his 40s. I think it's a miracle anybody can finish this race. But this guy lives in Kibbutz Karaza. And on October 7th, terrorists came into their house. His wife and he and 3 kids were there. They murdered the 20-year-old daughter. They murdered him. And they took the wife and kids as hostages to Gaza. They returned 50 days later. But the parents and grandparents of the murdered son and murdered granddaughter told the story of their late son's passion for the Ironman. And they now have a scholarship that funds, the King of the Mountains or whatever. And I share that story because that's the story of Israel and our people. That October 7th will be part of who we are, how we deal with that emotional and that physical scar. Of course, the other one I want to share for you basketball fans is an Israeli who was just in the NBA All-Star game on Sunday, I think it was. Crazy. And he wore an Israeli flag on his, it's unbelievable. But very few people, except for Spike Lee, but now he claims he didn't even know, but nobody boycotted this guy. Again, seriously, that's the way it should be. He can be Israeli. He might even disagree with his own government. I don't know. But the fact that he won more, that he's excelling in the world is fantastic. And of course, end with my grandkids, because why not? I get in with my grandkids. But anyway, that's my grandson, and that's my granddaughter. She's got a great smile. And again, I win brownie points and I fell and everything. But why am I putting the picture of them up? because he was born January 24th, 2024. And I remembered his bris in Tel Aviv. I was holding him, and it was in my kid's apartment. And I thought, what if there's a siren? Now, the good news is we get 90 seconds to go into the safe room. But what if there was a siren when I'm not going to go too graphic, and he jumped or whatever. And my daughter Guy was born. My daughter was 8th and 9th month pregnant during the 12-day war with Iran. She was going up and down into the shelter. But these are two of tens of thousands of kids who have been born in the past 2 years and 5 months almost now, who for them it's normal to hear sirens and to go into shelters. And they can, and their entire generation will on the one hand be scarred, but on the other hand will have an opportunity to rebuild back a little bit better. And with that, how do I stop sharing this, Dan? I turn over the questions.
Mike, has
Yes.
the frequency of the sirens,
Oh.
has that subsided?
Oh, we haven't had a siren in the center of the country since I want to say even June. There hasn't been a siren.
Wow.
Yeah, and when you guys were there, we had 2 or 3.
4.
So share me what happened. We were on a highway.
One. Oh yes, we had gone to Jerusalem.
We were going to the airport, I think.
Yes, and we were in the bus driving back on the freeway to the airport to drop some people off before we went back to Tel Aviv. And we heard the sirens, but it's when you're on the freeway, you don't really notice. And then Mike at the front of the bus is like, okay, we're going to pull over. And so we all had to pull over and get off the bus and lay on the side of the road. And everyone always puts their hands over their head and back of the neck to protect against the shrapnel. And that was an interesting experience.
That cost extra. We had a little extra.
But
But at the same time,
you were in the hotel, I think, one night.
Yeah,
First night.
we got there.
but
so-
at the same time, there were all these other cars that were just kept
So
driving.
tell us how you felt in the first siren versus the last siren. Like what happened to you?
Oh yeah, the first siren, I was terrified.
And where were you in your hotel?
We were
right?
at the hotel, and literally, like, we got to the safe room, and 5 minutes later, we were back in the lobby having happy hour.
Right. And you were in Tel Aviv, and where you were in the hotel and the restaurant, there's safe rooms.
Right.
But 5 days later, you hear another siren, and you're outside, and you feel totally different.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you're all going to feel that same way, and God willing, there won't be any sirens. But it's important because people always ask me. I've had a conversation with a couple in Dublin, Ireland yesterday, friends, our son's friends, whatever, in-laws, and they've never, Catholic, they've never been to Israel. And the woman says, I'm sure he thought it, but he didn't want to say it. But she says to me, she says, so, tell me, is it safe? I said, you guys live in Dublin. I said, yeah, well, what you know about Israel, you see through a prism of a narrow TV lens. And unfortunately, the narrow TV lens doesn't tell the entire story. Not to suggest that there's no chance there will be a siren. There's a chance, but it's much less than there was. And even if Iran is attacked, I think there are going to be a lot less. From Israel's point of view, it's going to be a lot less than we had beforehand. But there is a tension between safety and security. And Israeli society is so tragically prepared to protect people, not only the 4, now 5 levels of aerial defense, because we now have a laser that's unbelievable that up to 10 kilometers away can shoot something down, not a ballistic missile from Iran, but something from Lebanon or Gaza. And it gives Israelis this unbelievable sense of safety. And it's an accurate sense because we are well protected. And wherever you are, unless you're on the highway, there's a place you can actually go. And even if you're on the highway, there's a much greater chance that something happens all the time. That when the news is on, there was a siren, and 3 people were hospitalized. Why? Because they slipped, literally running out of their bed or out of the shower into their safe room. It's crazy. And that's why, and with the picture of my kids, that they live in a reality where in their nursery, they've had sirens, my grandson, and they know and they're drilled on how to do it. And the country protects its people, which unfortunately, if our neighbors were to spend the resources to protect them, then we wouldn't have as many dead people in Gaza, and we would be in a different situation.
What I didn't know until I went there is that there's this great technology. There's this app. Can't remember what it's called, but that tells you even before you hear the sirens, and then they'll say, depending where
Be
you
close
how
to
long you have to get to a safe room, and that was, and I felt very safe with that.
Even just the fact that I think there was a person shortly after October 7th, there was a person visiting and had a talk here, and how she said that in every house there is every
Many
apartment, there is
of
a
us,
safe
many,
room,
yeah.
or you know, or every apartment building, or you
Yeah.
know, it's just so natural that they have a safe room that they can lock, and you know, from possible attack, and it's just unheard of here. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's normal.
On the one hand, on the other hand, I went out to dinner with friends at Gastown, and he insisted that he drives by Hastings in Maine just to show me what's going on down there,
Yeah,
and it's unbelievable.
yeah,
And there are parts of cities in North America where you can't go to those places. So I always say, as raising 3 kids in Israel, our youngest son, the one you saw in the picture there, he complained to us in high school. His complaint was that we had a curfew. So we have a curfew. He says, look, I got to be home by 2 a.m. on Friday nights, and my friends don't have any curfew. We're like, kid number 3, like the pacifier, kid number 1, you sterilize it. Kid number 2, you put under hot water. Kid number 3, take the pacifier. The germs aren't good for you. So kid number 3. Now, but Israeli kids, when there's no curfew, now they're outside. They're not in your basement playing foosball or something. They're outside in the streets. And people don't think about that in Israel. And people don't think about 18-year-old girls walking home, at 11 o'clock from the train station. So there's this dichotomy between what people feel here and having to lock their doors and everything else in their house and feeling unsafe, maybe less in Vancouver than in big cities in America, and how people feel safe in Israel, and people are responsible and protective. Not that there's no crime, but it's like nothing compared to what it is in North American cities. But yet you've got the security issue, and security issue is something that we worry about a lot, but we worry about as a society, and therefore there are things in place that protect people and allow people to sleep in hotels comfortably.
that's a very good point. Yeah. But,
So you're saying that the threats feel more external than internal?
No. I just think that people in North America, in particular, and when they live in North America, they're worried about personal safety much more than Israelis do. I mean, being mugged or being, heaven forbid, worse, right? Israelis don't think about that. It happens, but it's at a much, much lower level. Everything from, home robbery to, it's there, but much, much smaller. But you don't have a worry that you can have a rocket. You might from Blaine, I don't know, or from wherever, from Mexico or something else, right? We do. But we also know that there are modalities in place to protect us. 5 layers of aerial protection, and there are places for people to go, and people know, where to go. It's different. I don't know.
Other
I can
questions
describe.
people have before we call it a night? So, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Please.
For this. The itinerary is not locked yet, and just as I was sitting here, I want to move one thing here. I think obviously else there.
Was something I said?
So we'll continue to dial it in, and some of that will depend on what the final makeup of the group is. There's a lot of people for whom you haven't been to Israel before, so I want to make sure we get some of those things that are, as we're doing already, Masada, the Dead Sea, you got to float the Dead Sea makeup. And it's also designed with the understanding that you'll come in early or you'll stay late or both. We're not staying in Tel Aviv. It's really expensive staying in Tel Aviv in the summer. I was trying to keep the cost of this trip down. But you'll find your way to Tel Aviv. We're going to be there for 1 day, of course. But you'll find your way there. Maybe you'll stay at a different hotel. You'll stay at a hotel the tour company arranges. You'll find an Airbnb. You'll have a friend, whatever it is. But you'll want to spend some time there. You might want to go to a lot. You might want to go on to Greece or someplace else afterwards. The tour company can help with all of that. I've worked with this company for 25 years. And they've had different names, but they're all the same people. And they're incredibly well-resourced in Israel. Mike and I get a security briefing every morning. They are dialed into the highest levels of the security infrastructure, the public safety infrastructure in Israel. We're not going to take you in any place that's not safe. And at the same time, we can't predict everything that's going to happen, and that's part of the experience. I joked that we arranged for the air raid siren on the side of the road as we were going to the airport. But that's part of the Israeli experience.
Right.
And to Mike's point, things can happen anywhere. You're very, very safe there. We'll get into more details about what to pack and what meals are covered and the whole thing. But essentially, you just got to get there, and you'll be well fed and well cared for, and your luggage will be moved from place to place, and the bus will be air conditioned. There'll be water available every day. It's going to be hot in the summer. There'll be water on the bus. It's going to be hot in the summer. We'll make sure that there's opportunities to cool off as much as we can. And I look forward to being able to spend as much time with each of you and all of you as possible. It's a really special thing for me to see Israel through your eyes. I've seen Israel. I was just there 2 weeks ago. I've seen Israel dozens of times. but I see it new every time through your eyes. So
And-
that's important for me as your rabbi to learn through you what there else is to see and to understand.
And then so the last time you were there was with Amy in the summer, right?
Well, I was just there 2 weeks ago at Hartford.
No, I'm saying before that.
Yeah.
So how did Israel look different to you than it did 6 months before?
Well, so it was really interesting. The fractures in society in Israel in May were so much apparent as they were compared to when I was there just before Pesach in 2024 or December of 2023, where the country had really pulled very much together and pushed aside all the fractures and the debate over democracy.
The unity
and
was.
everything and stuff. But we started to see these fissures expand and expand. There was tremendous frustration with the government. We were starting to hear more and more from the hostages who have now been rescued about their conditions. And this is still something that we see here that they don't see there. We'll learn it more when we get there. There was a lack of awareness of what was going on in Gaza to the people of Gaza. What we see on the news is not what they see on the news. It's like your Facebook feed. And Israelis did not see then, and I think still to this day are not seeing much, of the imagery that we see about the destruction in Gaza and the real humanitarian crisis that has existed and continues to exist there and the conditions that people are living in. And that's a tragedy in itself. So, all of that. And then this last trip, we started to do shared society stuff, Israelis and Palestinians in coexistence, which we couldn't do in December of 2023. Nobody wanted to have that conversation. The April trip wasn't focused on that. The May trip that we went on, we did a little bit of it. But this last time that I was just there with Hartman, we actually did some things in the West Bank. And I just made a note, I want to do some of that and replace some other things on our trip with that. Because I think that we're now able to have conversations with people that everybody was really viewing each other as an enemy, or at least with great suspicion. And now there's still tremendous frustration, but maybe the hopes of we can move on from this and we've got to get back to being able to live together. But you'll make that determination.
And I will also add, you'll be there in an election campaign, most likely,
Right.
which would be very, very, very.
Michael translate billboards for you that will blow you away.
But but one of the amazing things, and I'm glad I asked you that question because you answered, and I didn't know you were going to answer it in that way. But as an Israeli, we were as disparate and argumentative on October 6th as we had ever been in our history. And then October 7th comes and we unite, and nobody asks who you voted for. They're helping everybody out. And then, over time, the internal schisms emerge more and more and more and more. And I think today now, when you look at the headlines, I barely talked about this, but the issues of the fragility of democracy and the ultra-Orthodox voting and the corruption, it's unbelievable. And again, I am in awe as an Israeli by choice over the fact that we're actually still there. I mean, because of the external threats. And if you think of why the external threats so much more limited now than they were before October 7th, it's because of Israeli creativity and ingenuity over 75 years. And it's not that we made them like us. We didn't send them babka, every week and they said, oh, we like you guys. But there's that, and then there's this increasing division. And it's like all these, that's what makes people who aren't Jewish so fascinated by Israel. It is one of the greatest places with the greatest story anywhere ever in human history. And it's still an unbelievable story that is being written. And I think Jews everywhere in the world are influenced by and can influence by the story that is being written in the central stage of the Jewish story.
And I'll just say this, that
No, you're not.
I have a logistical question.
Yeah.
So July 13th, I take it there's going to be a bus to drive from Tel Aviv up to the north. So if we get there early and stay there early, then there'll be a meeting place for the bus?
either you'll meet us at the airport or more likely we'll pass through someplace that you'll meet us at. The buses can't stop like on a street corner, but they can certainly pick up.
But ultimately, it will depend on how many people come. So if there are 20 people and
They're all
16 are staying in, we'll pick a place in Tel Aviv and they'll start at the airport or whatever else.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Just for planning.
So you have a lot of experience working at camps, and I remember when I was a camper, I get a list of clothes.
Yes, we have all that for you.
Okay.
It's on the website already.
Okay, great.
And allergies and
No. I just like.
Yeah, there's a packing list
how
on
many
the
shorts
website.
I should have,
Yeah, everything is
all that.
shorts. For that time of year, everything is
Shorts and
shirts.
Shorts and
Uniform.
t-shirts.
Is there certain areas we're gonna be going that have like
We'll let you know.
Yeah, and that'll also be in the packing code. But like literally, you can wear shorts and t-shirts almost everywhere. Excuse me, except when we're in the old city, and probably when we go to synagogue on Friday night. You can wear shorts. Trust me, I see people wearing shorts, but wear pants and a modest skirt. But you could probably put everything in a little bag to carry. I mean,
Yeah, lots of light clothing and all of that. Yeah.
And lots of sun.
Sunscreen, yes. Good hats and all those things.
We could buy it there. Would we be able to?
You
Buy
could.
the sunscreen there, sure.
Yeah.
But
It's better
bring
by
it. It's
canoe.
better.
Okay.
Hey,
Just
I
a
have
bit.
to say that the trip that we just went on in May, when we see each other, the people from the trip, it's amazing. We all bonded so much, and we have these incredible memories and experiences. So that was sort of what I liked best about it.
And
Go ahead.
How likely do you think that we will get the number of people?
Well, I was more confident before tonight started because I knew of a bunch of people that were coming to check it out tonight. One represented a group of 6. They
Wow.
didn't come. We're recording it, but I was expecting them to come. I have another 2 groups of 2 each that told me they couldn't make it and asked if I could record it. So I talked to the tour company when I was there, and they said if we get 15, we'll go. So we're close.
Yeah, okay.
I think we'll get there. My wife thinks we're going to get there because she's telling me that I should make plans. I'm not going to be here in July and whatever it is. So I think we'll get there. Yeah.
So we're actually planning to show up early and leave late.
Good.
Nice.
But we want to go. At least I do. I want to go to Petra.
Yeah.
So
that can be facilitated through the
That's what I
company.
was
Yeah, the
trying
company
to-
can handle the whole
yeah.
stuff. Just
wow.
be on the lookout. There is a donkey in Petra that is very angry at me still. It used to be a lot heavier. And I tried to ride that donkey out of Petra, and it turned around and looked at me like, "Are you?" And then they put me on a camel, which gave me some terrible rash. There is one donkey that is like, "No."
I feel guilty about getting on donkeys, to be honest. So.
What is the connection with Javi Rediger? Like, are you friends with him?
No.
No, it's so through this particular tour company, they have a relationship, and I made the request. So we were supposed to have him on our last trip, and then he ended up being out of
abroad,
the
yeah.
country. It could happen again to
I
us.
listen to his podcast.
Yeah, no, he's
Yeah,
terrific. So Yossi, so what's not on the Yossi Klein Halevi we do have. That's a separate
But
arrangement.
we've met him here.
We've met Yossi, but that doesn't make him any less
No,
impressive.
he's great.
So, Habib is contingent upon him being in the country. All intents and purposes, he's going to be there. In the summer, they do a lot of this.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that he will be. If not, it will be somebody else of his talent and
it's-
staff.
I mean, I'm not a bettor, but because there's very little Jewish communal activity in North America in July and August,
Right.
people like that who are speakers generally don't travel on speaking gigs in the summer because they're not going to get as many people
Right. So they were
to come up.
Family.
Yeah, so do I. No, but yeah, it's true. But he's also got to make a living, so. And he can record his podcast in a hotel room in Vancouver. So
But he's a writer for the Times of Israel.
Among other things. He
Yeah.
writes for Free Press now,
Press.
too.
Yeah.
And podcasts and stuff. Other questions?
Adam's gonna be crushed.
Okay, so please tell your friends, if there are people that are still sort of hovering around this and considering it, to if we don't go because we don't get enough, the deposit's refundable. If they decide that they don't want to go in the end, then that's a different story. But and the more people that I can get sort of locked in, the better.
is
When
there
do
a
you think
cutoff
we'll
date?
know if it- yeah.
So the cutoff date's April 15th.
Okay.
I think we'll know well before that we're going. But I wouldn't book a non-refundable ticket just yet. You can wait. And the other thing, I remember what I was going to say. Whatever happens with Iran is going to be long over by the time we get there. So God willing,
God
it
willing.
is the 12-day war and less.
Not
and,
even. Yeah.
Less for everybody. But whatever's going to happen, I think, with all the military that's there now, is going to happen long before we get there.
They say it's gonna happen like
This
Yeah, I
weekend.
mean, it could be happening right now.
I don't. No, I'm gonna.
You
wait.
disagree with the rabbi? People-
No. I don't think there's going to be a military attack. Personally, I think there's going to be something very, very limited, if that, because I think the guy south of the border is very cautious about deeper engagement, and we shall see. But I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, we'll see.
But I've been saying it for a month now,
Yes.
and the heavy cost.
Okay,
Depends what he
everyone.
has for breakfast, really.
That's what I said.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for coming.
Good night.
Chocolate cake and Coke. Now, isn't that his diet? Aye.
Interesting.